Hello, and welcome to the First Brick Property Podcast, episode 16. My name is Hanny, and I've got my co-host here with me. I've heard that he's a body double for Drake.
It's true. It's true.
Of course, it's KM. KM, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing me like that. It is actually true. Back in my younger years, when before I wore glasses and I was a bit better looking, I used to get stopped a lot at university and stuff. People asking for photos.
To that extent?
Yeah, people asking for photos, and we're getting into restaurants and other establishments quite easily. It was good times. Peak of my celebrity
That's
life.
where you peaked, is it?
Yeah. It's been downhill since then. How are you going, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Just getting through COVID isolation. It seems to be winding down a little bit.
Yeah.
There's been some government announcements about easing up the restrictions, which should be good. It'll be good to get back out there and socialize a bit.
Yeah.
Looking forward to
Get
it.
back into the traffic and the rat race. And
yesterday when you put it that way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's not appealing.
No.
You just ruined it.
Well, yesterday I was driving and already it was just traffic.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Yeah.
Seems like it's getting back to some sort of normality.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, had a good week.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna be thinking about Drake for the rest of the episode. Thinking of what could have been. Drake, if you're listening and you need a stunt double, just give us a call.
Well, that'd be huge.
It'd be
if you got a response. Guys, let's see if we can get him a response to this.
Everyone has to tweet and message on Instagram and everything.
Let's see if we can do a 6 degrees of separation via Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or something.
Let's do it.
Let's see if we can get to Drake.
Let's do it. I've seen on other podcasts where they just hound celebrities and they get them as a guest.
Okay.
So let's hound.
All right.
Everyone's got to hound Drake. Let's get into the show because you don't care about what we're talking about. So today I thought we'd talk about something very important, especially in the current climate where a lot of people may be getting caught out. We're getting a lot of information coming through, a lot of articles coming out, a lot of banks saying things, maybe scaring people and whatnot about what's happening at the moment without a lot of data behind it.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be a good chance to speak about investor grade versus investor stock. What the difference between them is, what you should be looking out for, Spruikers and things like that. What do you reckon should be?
Yeah, it's a good topic because I guess the first question that people could ask is, isn't any property a good property if you're going to purchase an investment property?
Yeah.
If it's an investment property, then isn't it a good property? And I guess close to 10 million dwellings in Australia are available.
Yeah.
So how do you know what's good and what's not? And the short answer is not all property is made equal, and not all areas are made equal as well.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good line. Nice work.
Well, you said it, not me. So, that's very true. So there is close to 10 million dwellings in Australia, and not all of them make for good investments.
Yeah.
I read someone else mention less than 5% of the 10 million dwellings make good investments.
That's a huge statistic.
That is very big. And someone else said 2%. So I think the idea there is you can easily get caught out if you're buying the wrong property.
Yeah.
If you're buying the wrong asset. So before we get into it, I think we should talk about supply and demand really quickly, because supply and demand essentially runs economics.
Yeah.
It runs the property market, runs the share market, runs every market.
Yeah.
And supply and demand, we've spoken about a few times on the podcast. Very simply, the more supply you have and the less demand, the worse off it is for the seller, for the person with the product. Whereas if you have a lot of demand and very little supply, the person that's selling is the seller's market, essentially, because so many people want the product, which is very limited. Now, if we link it to what's happening at the moment in the property market in Australia with coronavirus, not much has happened in the property market. It's quite stable. Sydney's up 0.2%. Overall, across the country, we're pretty much flat. And a huge reason for that is there is no supply. most people have withdrawn their properties. Withdrawal rates have gone through the roof. So there's not much on the market. There's very limited stock. But the demand hasn't really dropped too much. Buyers are still there. People who had money still have money. People who wanted to invest are still ready to invest.
Yeah.
And people who wanted to buy a house to live in still want to buy a house to live in. But because there's less available, not much has changed.
Yeah.
So that's very important just to have that background knowledge of what supply and demand is, because it'll be very important. Have that in the back of your mind when we go through the rest of the show.
Yeah.
I guess. So let's start with investment stock. We'll just rattle off some things that explain, I guess, what investment stock is, and then we'll just elaborate a little bit on each. So do you want to hit a point for us?
Yeah. So medium to high density stock.
Yeah. So medium to high density stock, essentially your high rise buildings, your huge commercial, not commercial, your huge residential buildings, apartment buildings with 50, 100, 200 apartments in it. That's essentially investment stock because there's so much of it, but because there's so much of it, there's no scarcity.
Yeah.
So if me, you, and a bunch of our friends owned a bunch of apartments in this building, and then I needed to sell, and you wanted to sell, but I need to sell, so I put my price a bit lower. All of a sudden, your price
drops,
gets forced down because there's no difference between my place and your place.
Yeah.
It's all the same. There's no scarcity. There's nothing different about it. So it pushes the market down. So when you have medium to high density stock, that's investment stock.
Yeah.
Not investment grade.
The next point is predetermined stock. So that's property that's come on the market for the purposes of being advertised, marketed, and sold to investors. So if it's predetermined, that's not going to be good grade quality or investment grade property. It's something that you need to look out for. So keep that in mind. If it looks like there's someone disguised as a financial planner who's more of a salesperson, and they're just selling this property to anyone and everyone, there's no difference who you could possibly be. If you come knocking at the door, they're going to sell this property. They're going to market it as an investment property. That's a predetermined stock. So definitely look out for things like that.
Yeah. And just touching on that point, things like off the plan, house and land packages, that's predetermined stock. And usually, if someone's advising you on it, they won't be charging you a fee. That's because they're getting a massive kickback from the developer, the person building it. So it's all predetermined stock. It has very little weight on it in terms of being a good investment because, again, there's no scarcity there.
That's right.
There's a huge amount of supply and the demand for it is very little.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make it any good. Next thing that we can look at when we're looking at investment stock is unlimited stock that needs to be sold. So again, very similar to the predetermined stock, the house and land packages, there's unlimited amounts of them. They're everywhere. Your high density buildings, they just seem to always have availabilities, and for a reason. People don't want to live there. The government was talking about, I don't know how far they get with this, having a manufactured building boom post coronavirus to get trades back into jobs, which is great in the short term for the people that need work because they obviously get the jobs and they get paid. But then we have excess supply and we have, again, an oversupply in that situation. So that stock you don't really want to look at, and which causes an oversupply of stock as well. Yeah.
And also with any time where people are saying, oh, this is a good time to invest, the market's going down or the market's going to go up after this, heaps of spruikers come out, heaps of marketers come out, and people with no idea about property. And they just come out there and try and sell anything. So similar to what we mentioned before about predetermined stock, but this is just people that are trying to scam you on top of all of that. So just keep an eye out so that you don't fall victim to any of these scams or to any spruikers or to just simply people that don't really understand what they're talking about and they're just trying to sell something to you.
Yeah. Have you ever walked into the shopping center and just seen those guys holding pamphlets, I'll buy investment property here and there?
Some of them aren't even in English.
Yeah, that's right. And those are your properties. Those are your spruikers or your marketers or your salespeople. A lot of the time, those people actually think what they're selling is good because they don't understand the property market. They don't understand the fundamentals. But if someone's approaching you in a shopping center and has a set, sales sheet already of what is a good purchase for you, and they haven't gone into your financial situation, they don't know what's the best product for you because they haven't spoken to you, it's probably not the best product for you. So stay away from those properties that you're getting sold to in a shopping center. When we're looking at investment stock, you got to ask yourself, who's buying this, right? And investment grade products are purchased primarily by owner occupiers. So we know that the market is 70% owner occupiers and 30% renters. And then that 30%, I guess, is your investors. So owner occupiers are purchasing property for different reasons to these properties that are being sold as investment stock. So your off the plan, your high density, all that stuff, very different thought process goes into when you're buying that property as opposed to when you're buying a place that you want to live in. So you have to think about where an owner occupier wants to buy, what are they looking for? And I guess that moves us into investment grade properties. So owner occupier appeal. When you're looking for an investment grade property, you have to think like an owner occupier. You got to bid with your calculator, but think like an owner occupier in terms of where you're looking. So you want to be close to amenities, your lifestyle amenities, cafes, restaurants, whatnot, high safety scores, close to schools, public transport, work, parks, anything like that. Think about why do you live where you live? And there's usually a combination of at least 2 or 3 of these things that we mentioned that makes people live where they live. And you got to think, where do the masses want to live? Usually close to work, close to employment, close to schools, and that usually pushes us towards CBDs, as that's the main employment hub. So that's a one way of looking and finding investment grade properties.
And moving on from that, if you do end up getting a professional involved to help you buy an investment property, look at someone who's got a client interest. And if they've got a client interest, they won't have a predetermined stock list. So they will sit down, they will speak to you, they will understand what your investment goals are, and then they will find a property that will suit your goals. It won't be a predetermined stock list. It's not going to be properties that are available that they can just hand off to anybody that's looking to purchase an investment. It'll be someone who's got a client interest, and that someone that'll give you a tailored solution for your investment property and your investment goals.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of those, what you're talking about, very important that they're independent. And when we say independent, I mean they're not getting kickbacks. They're not getting paid by the developer. They're not getting paid by the real estate agent. Literally ask them how they're getting paid.
And it is likely that you'll be the one that's paying them.
Correct.
Having said that, it means they've got your best interest at heart and they're working for you.
That's right. If I don't charge my clients, that means I have to get paid from someone else. And if I'm getting paid from someone else, that means I have someone else's interest, not my client's interest. So look to people who are giving you a tailored solution for your needs, and not just, like you said, selling off a stock list. Investment grade suburbs. So location does 80% of the work. We've spoken about it on previous podcasts, and we just touched on it again with the owner occupier appeal. You have to look for those investment grade suburbs, the ones where people want to live, the places with amenities and stuff. There is exceptions to the rule. If you buy a lemon, in a great suburb, it's still a lemon. In saying that, it's better to buy a B class, let's say B class, not a lemon, a B class property in an A grade suburb than an A grade property in a C class suburb, for example. So you do want to get the location right, because the property, as we know, the actual building does depreciate in value. And what is appreciating is the land and the location. So you need to be looking at those suburbs for investment grade properties.
And a lot of people might not like this next point, but the truth is, if it's too good to be true, it most likely is. So you usually won't get a bargain.
Yeah.
What you'll usually pay for an investment grade property is fair value and possibly even above.
Yeah.
So it's unlikely you're going to get, I mean, you might,
Yeah.
but just keep in mind that most likely you will pay fair value, maybe a little bit more for a decent investment property.
Correct. So just touching on that again, where we're looking for clients at the moment, those places, even if there is stock, there's 4 or 5 people trying to buy it as well.
Yeah.
And for a reason.
Yes.
And when you have those 4 or 5 people trying to buy it, that's when you're not getting your discounts, you're not getting your bargains, you're getting fair value, or like you said above.
Yeah.
There are obviously times where we do get it at discounts, and because we're good buyers agents and we have connections with real estate agents, and we get options with off market and whatnot.
Yes.
But in general, you are just paying fair value, which is worth paying fair value to get in the right spot than getting a massive discount in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And if you're getting a massive discount, there's probably a reason for it.
That's right. And moving on from that, a little bit of demand is good because it means it's a good property that other people want. There's strong, stable rates of capital growth. It'll usually be growing areas. Like you mentioned earlier, areas that an owner-occupier or properties that an owner-occupier would consider look at. That would make it a good investment grade property. Yeah. So if there's a sign of demand, it's usually a good thing. Just make sure you don't, follow the crowd with hype and things like that. You still need to think about what it is that you're looking for, and make sure that it's the correct sign of demand. If there are other people that are interested in the property.
Yeah, that's a good point. The hype.
Yeah.
So fear of missing out, FOMO.
Yeah, we saw that not too long ago.
100%. So we saw it a couple of years back, especially with Sydney. Everyone, no matter where you bought, was making 10 grand a week or whatever it was. It was crazy numbers.
Easily.
Which was obviously not sustainable. And what happened was when the market turned and it became obvious that it's not sustainable, and then people started to sell, the places that were the most affected were the investment stock places, the places where people just bought anything because they just wanted to get in.
Yeah.
And that's really not the way to do it.
Yeah.
Which brings us on to our next point, which ties into what you were saying. Historical data. You have to have historical data to show that you've got your strong, stable rates of capital growth, your strong demand, your strong areas.
Yeah.
Without this historical data, for example, enough to plan, you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's going to go up, it's going to go down. You can make assumptions. There's an airport coming up here, or there's a new Westfields, or whatever it is, but there's no data to prove that it's going to go up or down.
That's right.
And when you're spending $500,000 and a lot more in Sydney, you don't want to just be taking a punt with your investment. So definitely want to have some data backing that.
And just to add on to that historical data point, what a lot of people might not know is that there is historical data about the property being available for rent and how much it was rented for as well. It's not just in relation to sales. And real estate agents and buyers agents and people like that have access to systems that can show you how much the property was last rented for, how long it's been on the market for. That's really important if you're looking for an investment property. It's not just the sales data, it's the rental data as well. So keep that in mind. It's another reason why you need historical data and why you should probably surround yourself with decent professionals as well. Yeah. If you're looking at buying an investment property.
Yeah. You'd know yourself. You've seen some of my spreadsheets.
Yeah, of course.
There's 25 different metric points that we're looking at per suburb.
I like more data than I knew was available, to be completely honest.
And having the access and it's one thing to have the access to the data, and then it's another thing to actually analyze it.
Yeah.
Because if you were to find that data, it's just a bunch of numbers sometimes, and you can what's the term, analysis by paralysis or something like that, where you just got so much data that you can't make a decision, you can't see where to go. So like you said, it's very important to look at the entire picture and not just certain metric points.
Yeah. Keep in mind as well, owner occupiers purchase with their heart. They find a property, they love it, they want to get it no matter what. Whereas investors will purchase based on the numbers. They'll use a calculator, they'll have a budget in mind, they've got a return on investment in mind, and that's what they use to purchase the property. So if you're an investor and you're purchasing a property, you're after a property that an owner-occupier would find appealing, but you're only willing to pay as much as an investor would pay. Correct. Because you're focusing on the numbers. Yeah.
So 100%. It's a very, very, I think that summarizes investment grade properties. If you're that line there. Perfect line. You've hit 2 good lines today. So owner-occupiers buy with their heart, but if you're an investor, you still got to use a calculator.
Yeah.
The next point with an investment grade property is you know, they usually have something special about them, or they can have something special about them. So, you know, like character homes and period homes and like that.
Yeah.
That adds to the scarcity.
Yeah.
You're not going to find a building with 80 units that have character in it, or period homes or whatever. Yeah. There's no scarcity in it. So that scarcity, again, is adding to that investment grade because no one else has it, or very little people have it. And again, that skews the supply and demand ratio into your favor. Value adding. So value adding is, you know, when we look at properties or we look at areas, have all the houses in the street been renovated and you found one that hasn't? Can you renovate it and really push up its capital growth? Can you really push up its value? If you find the areas that have value add potential, there's usually owner-occupier appeal to it as well, because everyone else around it has put value add into it. If you're in an area and you're the only one that's doing value add, then everything else, and you're way above what the rest of the street looks like, for example, again, that's not going to be great. You've caused some form of scarcity in the wrong area. You don't want to do that because you've overcapitalized, you spend too much money, and you 99% of the time don't get your return.
Yeah, and that's really important to know why you should really calculate your numbers before making a purchase, not just how much this property is worth or how much you're willing to spend on it, but especially if you're going to add some capital works to it, some renovations or anything like that, you really need to do a return on investment calculation before you go into that, so that you don't overcapitalize.
Correct. So if you're spending $1 and getting a return of $1, just don't even do it. Don't even bother. Yeah. You should be really looking to get a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 return on any capital works or any renovations. And can't you just buy any time still? Like, although, let me rephrase that. Although time in the market is more important than time in the market, you still have to time the market to an extent. And what I was trying to say before is you can't just buy anything still if it's in a good spot, because you still have to look at where the market is. And we go back to that example of when everyone was just buying and there was FOMO. The ones that bought because of fear of missing out in good spots were less affected, but they were nonetheless affected. And that's why when we look at investment properties, we're borderless. We don't just look at Sydney. We look at Melbourne, we look at Brisbane, we look at Adelaide. And then Sydney itself, you know, there's 658 suburbs in Sydney. There's over 15,000 suburbs in Australia.
Yeah.
North Sydney could be going really well, and then Western Sydney could be doing really badly, or vice versa. So you have to really look at the markets, because there's markets within markets.
Yeah.
So timing is important, not the most important, because time in the market is the most crucial thing. And with compound interest and compound gains, it kind of fixes most errors.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make that error because you don't want to have negative capital growth, and having to wait. And it's opportunity cost.
Yeah. We'll touch back on what we spoke about earlier about location. So one of the things to keep in mind is a good location is one with a 70-30 owner-occupier renter split. So what does that mean? That means a good investment grade property is actually one where there's more owner-occupiers than investors or investment properties in that same suburb. And again, we've mentioned this before, that a good investment grade property is one that an owner-occupier would like to own. So that's where we start looking at the location and considering how much of that location includes investors and how much of that location includes owner occupiers. So a good split is 70% owner occupiers and 30% renters.
Yeah, for sure. When you start to see areas with 50, 60% investors, the problem is nothing is going to cause that increase in gain in capital growth.
Yeah.
Because everyone's just looking at it with their calculators. So the person that might be buying your next door neighbor's property is also looking like you and saying, oh, if it goes above this number, it's not worth it anymore.
Yeah.
Nothing drives it because there's no emotion. There's no emotional value to it. So perfect point.
Same thing with when the property is on the market for rent. If you've got a building full of investment properties and, a few are on the market, then, a renter's got the option of 5 or 6 properties. Which means that alone will drive the price down. So it's not just your sales price when you come to sell, but it's while you're holding the property. The rental value will go down as well.
Perfect. And probably one of our last points on investment grade and how to pick them is really looking for land value. So land value is greater than land content. And we touched on it earlier. So you're looking at your land to asset ratio. And what that means is, it doesn't necessarily mean you need a large block of land, but one where the land component makes up a significant part of the asset value. So if the value of your property and your land is mainly coming from the property itself, that's usually a bad sign because as we know, the property depreciates.
Yeah.
But if most of that value is coming from the land itself, and then you have a nice property on top, bonus, then that's when you're looking at investment grade properties. So the land value is very important, more important than land content.
Yeah.
To close out,
essentially
what we're talking about with investment grade properties, it's all about scarcity. Are you close to the city? Are you close to the beach? Are you close to cafes, restaurants? Is it something different that owner-occupiers really want in this house or this area, as opposed to a flat in a 100-flat building?
Yeah.
So your scarcity really is that gives you that demand. It causes demand for your product.
So just because it's an investment property does not mean it's investment grade. And this is especially important if you're starting out in the market, because your first experience could pave the way for the rest of your investment life effectively.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Speak to a financial planner. Speak to someone who knows the market. If you've got a buyer's agent or a real estate agent or, like we said, a financial planner, someone who can help you out, someone who's got your interest in mind, someone that you're going to pay effectively so that they can look out for what you want, it'll make a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. So to summarize, important to buy investment grade and not investment stock for everything we've just talked about and what you just said right at the end there. So nice quick episode for everyone today. It's a wrap for today's episode regarding investment stock versus investment grade. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Hanny as always.
Thank you, Drake.
I know you're a very, very, very busy man. I have to schedule Hanny like 6 weeks in advance for these.
Always time for the podcast.
So thanks to everyone for listening. If you listened last week, you would know that we had a little gift on offer. So that gift is going to continue. If you don't know what that is, essentially, if you want to know how much your property is worth, send us a message on our socials or our email. Just shoot us a message with your name. Say that you're interested in knowing how much your property is worth, and we'll send you a full property report, complimentary, no charge. You just got to let us know that you want it, and we'll send that over to you.
Sounds good.
You might be sitting on a lot of equity, and you might not know it.
Yeah.
So definitely get in touch if you want to know how much your property is worth. You can find a lot of our content on our socials: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok. Just search First Brick Property. And if you have any topics you'd like discussed or any questions, please send us a message at hello@firstbrick.com.au or send us a message on our social platforms. If you enjoyed today's episode, please, we'd love a review. This really helps us get higher up in the charts and allows more people to find us and listen and learn. So send us your 5-star reviews or just give us a review, whatever it is. And as always, pass the pod.
Pass the pod.
Pass the pod. Tell one person that you think would be interested in this podcast, and that would really help out. Buying property is our passion. Helping you do it is our mission. See ya.